We have this tradition. I don't know, you do it once, it's tradition. You know that, right? That's how we do church. Well, we did it before. We always have to do it now. We do the graduation thing, and they did pretty fast this time. It was pretty good. It's only lasted a little over 2 hours. But it's downtown Fort Worth, and there's a few people there on weekends. And so we parked over about a mile away. So anyway, by the time you get your car and get out of there, we always go to IHOP for afterwards. And so you got to wait there for an hour. And then you get your food after about an hour. And then you eat, and then you talk for about an hour. Then by the time you get home, it's time to get up. It's just one of those tradition things you got to do. I'm so glad to be over that, to be honest with you. So I don't have to make that track again. And it's hard to write a sermon when you only have about an hour's sleep. I want you to tell you that right now. But anyway. But today is really a very significant day, and I think this time next year it's going to be even more significant, I think. Because I think that's one of the things we're going to change about who we are and what we do, and I'm kind of excited about it. There's a couple of things that are pretty neat about this day, and what makes it so significant. First of all, it is Pentecost, as you know. And secondly, it is Baptism Sunday, and the baptisms are going to be taking place at 11 o'clock worship service. We got 3 young people that are doing that. So sometimes you look at this and you see the banners, say, what in the world is going on here? What is Pentecost? Well, Pentecost is kind of known as the birthday of the church. That's what we call the birthday of the church. That's worth celebrating. But it took place 50 days after the Passover and the Jewish festival. It was a big celebration for the first harvest, right? The concept is this. You finally make it through this long winter or whatever they had over there, and then finally your crops start to come up after the Passover. And there's a way of saying thanksgiving to God. The first harvest comes, and then you take whatever is your first and your best. That's always important, the way that we give our gifts to God, always the first and always the best. And then you come back to celebrate in this big festival in Jerusalem. It's a big activity, big thing. And I want us to think about that concept, because the law was, and for a reason for that we always gave our first and our last. It didn't matter if you had a good year or a bad year. Always your first, always your best. Why do we do that? It's kind of saying to God that we're thankful for all that we have. And yeah, we may struggle, big deal. But we're going to put our trust and our faith that you're going to provide and take care of us as you have promised to us from the days of Abraham. So therefore, regardless of where I'm at, financially or what I have resource-wise, I will always give you my first and my last. It's not the way the preacher just pounds the pulpit and says, let's lock the doors and give us more. There's a concept behind that. It's to help us understand how to appreciate God with everything that we have, even if we don't think we have enough. Because if you ask anybody in this world, they never have enough, right? So you might as well just go ahead and give your first and your best, because it helps put our lives in perspective. So that's always the important thing to do. So if you remember that Jesus died during the Passover festival, and after he resurrected, he appeared back to his disciples, and he gathered them together and says, you know what? I want you to come right back here in Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover, and I will meet you here again. 50 days later, here come a group of people. They're gathering outside Jerusalem. They're trying to figure out what in the world took place. It's less than 2 months removed from his death and this horrible event, trying to make sense out of it, and there it was. God breathing life into these people who were down, who felt guilty, shameful for what had taken place, and God breathed life. God healed them. God empowered them to continue to do the very message that his Spirit was directing them to do. A new beginning, a new birth, a wonderful event. But the question I always have when we come to that point in this time in history is, why in the world would God be doing this? Why? What did they do to deserve that? The behavior of these people that they demonstrated just 50 days before was horrendous. They either allowed Jesus to be killed, or they did nothing to prevent Jesus from being murdered. Maybe even participated in the murder itself. Does that warrant us to say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and someone's going to murder my child, therefore I'm going to treat you with love and grace? But we have a God that chooses to do that, and also a God that instills us the power and the ability to do that very same thing. So here we are. This scene of people confused and shamefulness and trying to make sense out of all this, and then God appears to them and forgives them. Instead of anger and wrath, which they deserved, God forgave and provided them with a purpose, with a direction for living. That is the beautiful beginning of the church. That's Pentecost. And then we have Baptism Sunday. Baptism, to me, more than anything else, is very significant because it places a person into the movement that began on Pentecost. Every single person that gets baptized, either in the past or even on this day, is making a promise that they're going to change their life and be a part of the Jesus movement in the world. They are choosing to live out God's world in this world and not live by this world. We're choosing to live the way that Jesus strives to live out his life over the way I want to live my life. Today we're going to welcome 3 people into this community of faith who have made that choice to be born again, as we're called, into a life of the church that is celebrating its birthday. Now, having said all that and thinking through all that, here's the dangerous part. It got me thinking. Yeah, that's the dangerous part. And when I get to thinking, there's weird things that take place. But it did make me think a lot about how we celebrate. How we celebrate births and how we celebrate birthdays. Let's think a little bit about how we celebrate births. Anybody been born? Here? 3 y'all? I've heard rumors. Well, think about that. How do you celebrate the birth of your child, your grandchild? Was it such a grand event? Yes, that you were not going to miss, right? You were so willing just to say, you know what? I'm not going to go to work today. I'm not going to go to church today if I don't have to. I'm not going to worry about sleep because those rascals always come at 3 in the morning, right? I'm not going to worry about vacation. I can vacation anytime. I'm not going to worry about trips that are planned. I'm not going to worry about all that stuff because that event of a birth is like nothing else you've ever experienced in your life. And I am going to be there, right? Think about birthdays. How do we celebrate birthdays? How do you celebrate the birthday of your child or your grandchild? Again, is it an event that you will not miss? Is it? Just something that's big? Sure it is. What kind of day do you set aside to celebrate somebody whose life is brought into this world and you think, where would my life be without this birth, without this child? What a wonderful occasion. I have heard from many of you. Your child or your grandchild is 1 year old and you have this massive birthday party, man. You have the whole thing decked out. Hundreds of millions of dollars spent on this event for a 1-year-old. Has no idea what's going on. That's worth celebrating, though, isn't it? It's a wonderful occasion. It's so incredibly important to us, isn't it? Now, I'm going to make a confession before I go any further, before my kids get here. I am lousy at celebrating birthdays. It was never an occasion in my home growing up due to my dad's upbringing. In fact, any celebration that involved gifts or receiving gifts or giving gifts was something that he did not like, period. I know my dad is not the only person in this world who has gone through this. In fact, any celebration is meant with the same type of grumpiness that my children now experience. You know what I mean? Here's a picture of my dad right here. Can you tell which one is him? Can you? It's $1 million. No, that's Uncle Cecil. He was the ringleader. The little one is my Uncle Donald, and the baby girl is not there. But that little tow-headed kid on the right, that's my dad. In fact, if you want to know what Sam looked like when he was that age, that's Sam. If you remember that. Yeah, same hair, wasn't it? That's my dad. And the way this picture pulled out, my uncle showed me this picture, and he says, you know, my family had an option. We could either paint the house or buy a wagon. Yeah. So they chose the wagon for once. It was the second gift that they received ever. The second one was during Christmas where they had to share a used bicycle. That went over well with 4 kids, right? Yeah, my dad has some bad stories about what he did to his sister to get the bike back. But I want us to think about that. Dad never forgot those days of being left out. And if you think you're a kid and you go home come back from school from Christmas and all these kids got new clothes or new shoes, and there's my dad there in bare feet or something that's barely put together. Never received a gift. Never enjoyed Christmas, never enjoyed birthdays because there was absolutely nothing materially. It affected him his entire life. My dad's childhood affected my childhood. We know how that works, right? We know how that works. And my kids will tell you that I passed that right down to them. I may not be very good at celebrating the day they were born, but at least I'm grumpy when I do it. Natalie is really good at reminding me about how grumpy I am during those occasions. So it gets me thinking about what we do in this world versus what we should be doing in God's world. Let's think about that. A few weeks ago, I went and visited a church for worship. And it was a church that celebrates everyone's birthday. Everyone's birthday on the entire church. But it was a celebration of their birth into the faith. That's amazing. Their baptism was just like our celebrations of birthdays. On their day of baptism, they had food, they had cake, they had parties, they had celebrations, they had bounce houses, they had the whole 9 yards. They go all out as a church to have this great occasion that is of the utmost importance. It is the day that a child or a person has made the greatest decision that they could ever make in their life that is going to lead them in a whole new, different direction in life. It was the same realization that the Apostle Paul makes mention in the book of Ephesians. When he's talking about who we were versus now who we are. And Paul said, you know, even those who are alive, even though we are alive, we were dead. We were living to our own pleasures, living to our own successes. We were living the curse of this world. We once lived according to whatever passions of our flesh. We followed our own desires of our senses. We did what we wanted to do. But God, for whatever reason, who is rich in mercy and out of great love for us, chose to love us even when we were dead. God made us alive together with Christ. This isn't our own doing. It's a gift of God. It's not the result of what I have done. So none of us can boast. And here's my favorite part. For we are what God has made us. We are created in Jesus Christ for good works, which God has prepared beforehand to be our way of life. I don't know, maybe it's where I'm at in my life, but that is an amazing statement. that we're just not here working, going home, doing the dishes, taking out the trash, going, spending money, working, going home, taking out the trash. You get the picture. We're created the way that God needs us to be created. We just have to figure out what in the world it is individually, because that is the life that we are called to live. And it really makes me wonder, as I'm thinking, why in the world don't we have an all-out celebration, right? For every person that is born into the faith, where the entire family of God participates and celebrates on our birthday, Pentecost. What a great thought. I'll even admit that one. So I wonder, why we don't? Why we don't celebrate the birthday of our faith? In my thinking, Pentecost should be the second greatest celebration, right next to Easter. I'm not talking about Christmas, because we close church on Christmas. That's what people do. Do we not really celebrate those things in those people's lives that are the utmost value to us? Do we not do that? Is our faith not something that we need to celebrate? Have we truly forgotten as a people who we were? That once we were not a people at all. That we were just going through the motions of trying to survive to get through our death safely. But here, by the grace of God, God took us off the streets. God cleaned us up. God created us for good works, with a purpose in mind and a vision to illustrate God's way of life to the world. And baptism is the very day that we take our place in God's kingdom, and we declare to all people around us, hey, I'm God's child. And my role in this life is to change what I thought I was into who God knows me to be, so that I can impact God's people, the world around me, with the gifts that God has given me. This day should be one of the greatest celebrations that the church should be celebrating, where everyone in the church family is expected to take their place at this celebration. To me, I love that thought, and it makes a lot of sense. So we may be doing things a little bit different starting next year. And it makes a lot of sense because we celebrate the natural birth, right? The day of which we are introduced into the world. But what if our life does nothing? But this day we celebrate the day that God claims us, and we claim God to help us understand who we are and what it is that God needs us to do in this world. God provides us with a purpose. And that is the greatest celebration than even the day that we were brought into this world. Because this is on our doing, our own choosing. I want us to think through this. Because this kind of faithful acknowledgement to God is just one of the many, many things that we need to remember and embrace. Because our faith, man, is so amazingly important to who we are in our life's journey. Pray with me. God, you created us with a purpose in mind, with a direction, with a vision. Forgive us if we get so busy with what we do that we can't hear or see you. Forgive us if we fail to understand what it is that you call us to do, and thinking that our way is your way. Guide us and direct us, we pray, as your people, as we strive to resurrect your church, to be a place that people can come in to discover themselves and find that person that you created them to be, that we may find the fulfillment of impacting the world with your way of life. Thank you for this day and for the many days that lie ahead. In Christ's name we pray.